Hey, Elliot.
Oh, sorry, I was going to clear my throat. We could keep that in. Hey, Brian.
What's the talk of the table today?
This week, we're sitting down with Samantha Leigh. Sam is a game designer known for such hits as Anamnesis, Outliers, The Upcoming Death of the Author, and a number of other wonderful games. You can find Sam's TikTok and YouTube TTRPG recommendations, both under @GoblinMixtape. Sam is a friend of the pod, friend of ours, a collaborator on the recent Project Echo, and one of the best people we've encountered in this space. So, Sam Leigh, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Echo? Don't do that. Sorry, my echo in the other room just responded.
Oh, no. That's great. Well, thank you for the introduction, Elliot. I'm so glad to be here. I'm delighted to be able to say that I've chatted with both of you before, and I'm just excited to talk, and I'm excited to chat with both of you at once here. Yeah, it's been great. All of the kind of collaborative work that we've done so far, it's been wonderful. And you guys are both a pleasure to work with and talk with, so I'm very excited.
Aw.
Thank you so
You're
much.
making us
You
blush.
as well.
Making us blush.
Yeah. We were getting ready for this interview, and we were like, we're really not worried. We love Sam. We'll just have a good time.
Yeah, I've been
chatting.
excited. This is great.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
hey, Sunday morning, let's go.
So obviously we know who you are, but for somebody who might not know who Samantha Leigh is, can you give a little bit of background about who you are in this space?
So I am a game designer, and I am the owner of Blinking Birch Games, which is just a kind of my own small business, just a sole proprietorship that I set up for game design. And so other than writing my own games, which Elliot mentioned a couple of them, Anamnesis being the best known one right now, I also do a little bit of design work for other people's projects. So I've written for projects like Cloud Empress and The Zone. And I also do a little bit of editing work, a little bit of voiceover work. I kind of have my fingers in a bunch of different bowls. That's not how the saying goes. Pies.
In the pies.
That's the
Like
one.
it. Kind of in the pies.
Yeah. But it's really fun. It gives me some variety in what I do. And then I also do make a lot of videos that feature different games in the indie TTRPG space to just kind of shout out what's out there and highlight some of the games that I think people might enjoy.
It is fun to find all of those resources that are kind of out there that are just people helping to spread other people's work. You know, Indie RPG newsletter, and
Love that newsletter.
It's a great newsletter.
Yeah, Thomas Manuel does a great job.
Thomas Manuel. Oh, and also I just remember that connection. Thomas Manuel was the layout artist for Anamnesis, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. He did a great job. It's awesome. Yeah, he's a great guy.
But your TikTok and now I think you've expanded to YouTube as well recently.
Mm-hmm.
Is just like an invaluable resource. Like every time one comes up, I'm like,
thank you.
ooh, let's check it out. So our kind of goal for this conversation, what we wanted to touch on is you recently made the jump from being a extremely successful, like hobbyist game designer to now it being like a part-time job or a part-time thing. And we kind of want to we want to kind of dive into that with the idea that our listener here is likely someone who's wanting to do a similar thing. They're maybe making games or maybe want to make games and want to know what the path is to becoming a professional game designer, a person who's doing this with their life. So trying to figure out like what your path was to that point, and then kind of like setting up a yardstick for anyone listening of being like, this is where I was when I decided to make this jump. These were kind of the metrics I was looking at and realized like, oh, wow, this is now a reasonable thing for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess first question is starting off from absolutely zero. How do you go from, zero to your first game and then to something like Anamnesis that has like a bit of a wider acclaim to it?
I think that one of my biggest pieces of advice would be to start small. If you haven't designed a game before and you're looking to get into game design, definitely start with something that, first of all, you're really, really passionate about. Like, don't even try not to care about whether people are actually going to play it or not. Try not to care about how wide of a net it's going to cast. Write something that you really, really just love writing. Write something super indulgent and something that is, I would recommend overall, a shorter project so that you can finish it. Because it is so a lot of people are very daunted by the idea of writing their first RPG. Your first RPG can be like 5 pages long, and then you have a finished product that you have completed instead of a 100-page manuscript that you get burnt out on and never release. And in my opinion, being able to fully complete something and release it is really motivating. And it's a really good feeling to actually be able to produce something that is finished. So even if it's not good, my first couple of games were not good. And even I would highly recommend just trying to complete something. And again, starting with something that you're really passionate about, that you really just love creating. And then from there, just practicing on smaller projects, but then it's very much like writing. People always talk about how with writing you just have to do it a lot to get better at it, and that's the same thing with game design. The more that you design and the more that you read too, the more different games that you read to get kind of inspiration from, the better of a game designer that you're going to be. And so I highly recommend just giving it practice by writing some short games, releasing them, and eventually you'll end up writing one that you feel really, really proud of and that you might want to take it a step further. At least that's what happened for me with Anamnesis. I had been writing about a game a month in 2021, and I wanted to... Anamnesis was meant to be like my March game or something like that. And I wrote it and I was like, I actually think that there's something here that is kind of special. And I think that it would be worth it to me to make the effort in making this into a larger game, or like a more a nicer looking product, something that a little bit more work is put into, something that has physical copies available. And then I ended up doing the research in order to do that. And there's a lot of research, which we can talk about. But it didn't come as a result of me going, oh, I want to make a printed game. Let's sit down and figure out what printed game I'm going to make. It came as a result of just me practicing writing, trying to write a little bit every month, and then finding something in my writing that I really liked and that I really wanted to make bigger.
I feel like, especially in the tabletop role-playing industry, anyone who wants to do it, whether you want to be like an actual play podcast, or whether you want to be a game designer, whether you want to be voice actor, you kind of end up becoming a jack of all trades, regardless of whether or not you want to, just by necessity. I think this is true for most creative fields. But going from games that were published maybe only digitally to something that is physical, like Anamnesis was, is a big jump on just like, you got to learn a whole bunch of extra skills that you maybe don't really want to learn, but now have to.
Yes.
Were there any moments in that were particularly challenging or worthwhile to like kind of point out as like, hey, you know, if you want to make the jump from like the small games that you're making to make something a little bit bigger, you're going to have to learn about this, but don't worry, it's not that bad. Just like, you know, be prepared, it's coming.
I kind of felt that way about printing. I felt that way about putting in the print order to create the physical copy of the game, because I knew absolutely nothing about any of that whatsoever. I was looking up stuff about paper sizes, paper thickness. I'm like, I don't know what these mean. I don't have a point of reference. Yeah, it's not like it's when you're starting from zero with it, it's very hard to kind of find that information. But I found that it actually wasn't quite as challenging as I had originally thought it would be in my head to learn these things. Mixim actually has, I don't know if they do it anymore, I think they do. They have this sample paper packet basically that they can send you for free. So if you go onto their website and you request one of their little packets, they will mail it to you for free. And it is like a pack of 3 or 4 little books that say like, hey, this is this type of cover on this book. This book has this page width. So you can see it and you can feel it and you can understand what each one means. So it was after ordering that packet that I figured out which page size I wanted, which cover size I wanted, what type of cover I wanted. Anamnesis was an uncoated cover, and I didn't really know the difference between all of these things. But I realized after kind of seeing them and feeling them, I'm like, oh, I want Anamnesis to be uncoded. So that is a big resource, is just doing the little free packet that they have there. And then also the actual act of putting in the order to do the printing. Basically, it's once you kind of have all of that down, once you know what type of paper and cover you want, it's not as complicated as it might seem to be. You upload the file that you need and you can look over it on the site to just check it over and make sure that it looks fine. And then usually I would suggest printing a test copy or two just to make sure that it looks good before you print like a huge batch. And
you say that, and I'm sitting here right next to our Project Echo test print, and Elliot and I got it, and I turned to page 10, and I saw that a section of the print went over to the wrong box in a way that haunts me to this day. and you know, getting a test print it's like a slow thing because you got to wait like a week or two. But by getting this test print, we saw like 2 or 3 like just errors that were made, and we realized that one of the fonts that we chose needed like an additional step before it looked good because it kept like
it helped us solve a big issue.
Yeah, big issue.
With the font. Yeah.
And had we not gotten a test print, Elliot, what was your total for we ordered like 400 books, which was a couple $1,000.
It was $2,800 for the books and planners all told. Yeah.
So it's really worth the extra week and a half.
It's worth the extra week. It's worth the extra $50 to get the test prints. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I also do want to say, like, I am in America, so it is pretty easy overall for me to do print runs of games compared to some other countries. So if you are a designer from a country that printing is a lot more expensive or there aren't as many resources for it, it does make things a lot harder. But there are also a lot of designers from the States, from the UK, or a lot of distributors who will help you to do a print run of your game. Trying to think of distributors who do that.
Plus One EXP.
Plus One EXP. I know that Soul Muppet helps with that in the UK. So there are people who you can reach out to about your idea for a game, or even if you have a finished PDF and you just can't print it, you can chat with them to see if they'll help with the distribution. So there are resources out there if you are having trouble printing.
And luckily, this is also a field of people where like just having a PDF, just having a digital version is still a great thing.
Absolutely.
It's still a thing that people find incredibly valuable.
Putting out, I mean, I think that like what you were saying, Sam, about like just putting out that first game, even if it's just a PDF, you still learn so much just by putting something out there, just by like having to make an itch page. Like the first time having to make an itch page, it's like, oh, wow, there are a lot more pieces to this than I thought through. And I have to think about like how I want to lay out text and like the promo images and everything. It really like every new game release, even if it's all PDFs, I feel like every game I've released, I've learned some new aspect of whether that's design or like everything that goes into the release of it. Even before you get to printing, there's still so much learning you can do just by continuing to make PDF games.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
There's a coffee shop I go to a lot, most days of the week, and I edit there for a couple of hours. And above the bathroom, there's a sign that I really like. And it's this like fancy sign. It's got fancy script, and it says, "Go look a fool, 'tis the secret of a wise man." And I really I saw that when I was like, I don't know, 22. So it was the perfect time to see something like that.
Yeah.
But I've really taken it to heart in that everything that I've ever done, so like actual play, podcast, sound design, I've made a couple of like one-page games, all that stuff. Every time it sucks for like a couple of minutes where you just don't know what you're doing. And if you just get past that feeling of being uncomfortable with not being good at something, it gets easier. You get better. And then all of a sudden you're comfortable doing it. And you can have fun, experiment, and make things that were small, bigger and grander and more amazing and fun. It's just getting over that first, it just sucks for a second. Like it's just know it's going to suck for a second, but then it gets easy and then it gets fun.
I would also say like the kind of go look a fool part of that. For me also, highly recommend like just asking people, just ask questions. You know, it is okay to show to people that you do not understand these pieces of the process. It is okay to be like, hey, I'm a brand new designer. I don't know anything about printing. Can somebody like recommend different printers that they use? Can somebody explain what these different paper sizes mean? The TTRPG community is often like really, really helpful and is really happy to help new designers. And a lot of people create their own resources that you might not know are out there, but they can link you to. And so it really, I've asked so many questions about so many things. And I'm so grateful for everybody who has helped me along the way, because when I ran my first crowdfunding campaign, I talked to like 5 different designers who had run their campaigns to just make sure that there wasn't anything that I wouldn't know that I don't know that I should know.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just so helpful. So just engaging with the community and feeling like you can ask these questions is huge.
Don't be afraid to, no one knows
Yeah.
before, when they first start, like it's like there's no reason to expect yourself to know how all these things work. One of the things that hit that home for me was Sean Patrick Kane has this Twitter thread of my adventures in selling stuff where they go through all these things, all these lessons. And one of the template emails on there is the one about stocking with retailers. And in that email, Sean had put a line that said, I'm new to this process, so welcome like any feedback or things I'm missing. And I remember like seeing that and using it and being like, that makes me feel so much more comfortable about sending this email out for the first time to a store. Like just like fully, let's just put it out there. It's like, hey, I've never done this before. So like, and like it made the responses I got back, even if I was getting a no from a store, very kind. They were always just like, your approach was great. Please reach out in the future. Like, thanks so much. And I think that honesty about where you're at, like people appreciate even, when you're getting started, and makes them want to help you, rather than if you came into it like, oh, I already know how to do all this. Like, I don't need any help.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, just being able to say like, hey, if there's anything else you need, let me know. That's like, I'm still learning and I want to be able to help out how I can, is huge. And people really appreciate that, I think.
I think there is also something good to be said about understanding where no can come from, because whether you're trying to like get your game into a store, whether you're trying to get it stocked at like IPR various places, whether you're trying to find a collaborator or like someone to come on your interview show or something, getting to a yes is just 2 people's priorities lining up perfectly, and then it works out. A no doesn't mean like, oh no, I don't want to work with you because I don't think you're good. Oh no, I don't want to stock your game because I don't think it's good. Oh no, I don't want to come on your show because it's not good. It's just those priorities and that timing doesn't intersect perfectly. So just knowing that like anytime you feel any of those like no's creeping in, it's very often not a commentary on anything that you're doing. It's just, the timing didn't work. This doesn't really work for me. I'm working on other things. And I think that is a good thing to remember, especially when you're starting out in anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's also a situation of, the kind of very classic saying of you miss all the shots that you don't take, right?
Yeah.
Because it is just like any other industry, even if you are getting no's from possible collaborators, from stores, it doesn't hurt to keep reaching out to other ones. And as you practice more as a designer and as you learn more about the community and as you make more connections and play more games, then over a period of time, you'll be able to find those collaborators and you'll be able to find those stores that are willing to stock your games. It's just a matter of patience.
And there is something there as well. When you're reaching out to someone for any of these types of things, do your best, do the work on your end to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big one.
Like when we reached out to Rowan Rook and Deckard for our die season to kind of have Grant come on, to have Kieran come on, we sent a big email that was like, here's everything we want to do. Here's what we're going to be doing. Here's the quality of our stuff. And here's why it's good for you. Like, this is what we're hoping to do to like promote this game and make it sound as good as possible. Here's your time commitment. We're going to make it as minimal as possible for you. We can make it as easy as possible for you to get on the phone. What do you think? We made it as easy as possible for them to say yes, so it wasn't too hard. And I think that's true for if you're trying to get your game stocked, if you're trying to, anything.
Right.
Do that extra little bit of work on your end and make it easier for someone else.
That's a big one too for commissioning collaborators. So wanting to work with a layout artist for your game or wanting to work with an artist, being able to make that work as easy for them as possible by providing references, by providing really detailed explanations. That's something that I'm still working on. I feel like I've learned a lot after commissioning art from a couple of artists, and I know that I can be better at it. And I'm still learning the best way to provide good information about exactly what I'm looking for and exactly what can help them get started. And it's okay to ask too. I know that When I asked Thomas Manuel to do the layout of Anamnesis, I started that conversation by saying, hey, I've never worked with a layout artist before. What can I provide you? What would be helpful to you? And he told me, and he was like, examples from other games that you feel inspired by, that you kind of like the look of, as an example.
Yeah. It's a translation thing.
Yes. Yeah. So he told me like, hey, this would be helpful, that would be helpful. And then I kind of created a document that had that information in it and sent it his way. And that was helpful to him. It was helpful for me in order to get my thoughts together in terms of what I was looking for. And so it just ask whoever you're working with, like, how can I best help you? Because often if they've been doing this for a while, they know. They know what's going to be helpful for them. And they can let you know.
Yeah, I remember I sat down with an artist, Eddie York, who's made art for games like Nova and Rune for Spencer Campbell.
Fantastic art. Yeah, amazing.
Incredible artist. And I remember I reached out to Eddie and was like, hey, I may have a project down the line. I don't really know how to approach someone to do the kind of work you've done for these games that I love. Would you be willing to just chat with me about what all goes into that relationship for you? And Eddie and I had a great half-hour consultation where he just went through everything that goes into the process for him, like how he likes to be briefed, what his rate is, how he thinks a good working relationship works. And I haven't, I've only made games where I've done the art, which is will be a whole other personal jump to get over for myself, just because I don't know how to necessarily communicate art as somebody who makes it. It's a weird mental gap there. But I still feel like I learned so much about collaboration in this space and how that looks from that conversation. And that was just a Twitter DM or a Discord DM, just asked to have a conversation. Speaking of collaboration, Sam, I do want to, maybe this is a little bit of a curveball at you, but I want to kind of maybe do a little bit of a deep dive here on our experience collaborating for Project Echo.
Yeah, sure.
And what that looked like, just kind of let that lay that bare for people to see. So I guess I'll kind of intro it and then turn it to you. But so you and I had met online via Twitter at one point, chatted a little bit and sort of were vague mutuals on Twitter, kind of friends on Twitter, but didn't really know each other that well. And then I think I messaged you on Twitter and was like, hey, I have a new project that I just want to talk to you about. I think you could be good for. And then we talked about what ended up becoming the temporal spread in Project Echo. And I guess I want to throw to you, how was that experience of of me reaching out to you and everything? And was there anything candidly that you wish I had done or anything like that?
Honestly, it was a great experience. And in fact, there's pieces of that experience that I am taking with me as a designer, because a lot of times my collaboration has been, messaging each other. And honestly, so Elliot, when we chatted, you were like, hey, let's set up these calls, let's do a video call to chat with each other, and we can talk about it and we can see if it's a good fit for you. And then once I agreed to be on the project, then we did a couple of check-in calls just to see how things were going, so that I could let you know kind of where I was. We could see how you're feeling about it. And that was great. Most of my collaboration has actually just been through messaging. And, in hindsight, it would have been great to do more face-to-face, or at least screen to screen, right? Discussion, whether through voice or video, and just really make sure that you're on the same page, that you guys are feeling comfortable. And that is something that I plan to do with future projects, that so long as my collaborators are comfortable with it, I'd love to do voice calls with them. I'd love to do video calls with them, because I did feel like that created a connection, and an understanding that is harder to achieve over text. What a surprise. So that was great. And doing the check-ins too, trying to schedule meetings out a little bit. You would kind of suggest timelines to me, and I would say, I think I need maybe about 2 weeks, and then I believe that that's enough time for me to kind of make more progress on this, enough that I have something to talk about again. And we'd be like, great, let's do 2 weeks from now, let's do a call. And, sometimes that schedule got modified. But that was a really great way to just keep in touch and to check in and just to see how things are going and make sure that we're on the same page with everything. So honestly, I had a fantastic experience with it.
Yeah.
Also, it just provides like a way to brainstorm together too.
Right.
I love brainstorming sessions. And so it's a lot easier to do that over voice chat than text chat, to really kind of
Absolutely.
bounce ideas off of each other and describe things. And so, yeah, I mean, I know you said it would be candid about it, but I can't think of anything that I would change. I think it was great.
Well, great. I'm glad. Me too. I mean, it was an incredible experience. And I do think that like what you're saying about the video calls, I know some people aren't super comfortable getting on calls always, but like if you are, like it is such a valuable time to spend with someone who you're working together in that way. Like you said, like brainstorming sessions, I feel like even though your direct work was the temporal spread, I feel like I got so much out of just us chatting in between the stuff about the specific mechanic you were writing. Like I would like tell you about a new thing that would like I had written for something else in the game, and like you had good reactions or like good thoughts and feedback on that. So yeah, it really created that like strong collaborative relationship. And I think like what you created in the end, what made me feel like it was a successful collaboration is that your section of the game feels so of you and of the game. Like it fits within the game very seamlessly, and then it also has like a really strong Sam Leigh character in my opinion. So that's, to me, that means I feel like that means that we did well, and
I
think
so.
And it came together.
I hope so. I'd like to think so.
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
And if you want to judge for yourself, Project Echo is available everywhere.
I know. I started to worry I was getting self-indulgent there.
No, it's good.
But all this to say that like we connected, and I think our first call, I think like to like put some maybe lessons on this. Our first call was like mostly about getting to know each other. I think we talked about the actual potential collaboration at the like very end, but it was also like we just had interacted a little bit on Twitter, and it was like, hey, do you want to just like chat? Also, I have this like potential thing to talk to you about, like potential opportunity. But I think we spent like 45 minutes of that first call just getting to know each other, and then like the last like 15 or 20 minutes talking about the actual collaboration. So that's right, like that's a nice aspect of it as well, is that like you're also just like making a friend often in a collaborator when you get to like do something like a video call versus like, not that messages always feel transactional. I sometimes feel like a bit of like an old man about it with like, I'm like, I prefer calls. I don't like texting.
Hey, I get it. I feel like calling is, for me, if I'm getting like a lot of texts, it's almost exhausting. I just like can't even, I'm like, I'm going to put these over here and I'm going to reply to all of these when I feel like I am in the right space for it. Calls are just a little bit more refreshing.
I had a great experience the other day where I reached out to a friend of mine. I wanted to ask him some questions about Patreon. And I was like, hey, would you want to like do a call sometime this week, like meet up for coffee? And he goes, my week's a little busy. Can I call you in 5 minutes? I was like, oh, molto bene. Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect.
That might stress me out. Call me in 5 minutes might stress me out, but
it was perfect. I was like, yes, absolutely, call you in 5 minutes. I'm ready.
I'm becoming more and more of the call in 5 minutes person.
Let's write it on the checklist right now and check it off 3 minutes later.
Oh, I love that. I love that feeling. I have sticky notes all over the place. I still keep a paper planner. Yeah, I'm sure you guys love this with Project Echo. You know, I got it right next to me, right here. Every year, I live and die by that thing. The feeling of crossing something off the list, impeccable. Cannot recreate it digitally. And being able to write something on and immediately cross it off, fantastic. It is out of the brain. It is no longer sitting in the brain as like a mental, I need to do this eventually. It's just done. And then you don't have to think about it anymore. I love it. It's perfect.
I have been guilty every now and then of like, I have my to-do list on my phone or whatever, and I'll do something that wasn't on the to-do list and I'll type it in and immediately cross it out just because I'm like, I want that satisfaction.
I have 100% done that before. Absolutely.
It's my dirty little, my guilty pleasure. So I do want to pivot a little bit because you very recently made the jump from being a game designer as like a side project, as a side hustle with a full-time job, to this being like a part-time thing. Like you've really made the jump, the dive to committing yourself to, all right, I got to make this work because a portion of my livelihood depends on it, rather than it just being a thing that supplements your, whatever your day-to-day job is. I'm curious, when did you know that that was a viable option? And how long after that did you actually make the jump? Or and this is a possibility because this is kind of how I would do. Is it even a viable option yet? And you're just like going for it. Are you diving in without reaching for a branch yet?
I think, well, the first thing is I want to preface all of this by saying that I'm in a pretty privileged position. I have like some savings saved up. That means that if I do this for a year and it really flops, it's not going to drain me. I don't have debt, which is a huge one. So I'm definitely in a position of privilege. And that is a big reason why I can't do this. But kind of in addition to that, going part-time is something that I know that I've wanted to do for like a couple of years now. Really ever since Anamnesis was released, which is like pretty early into me writing RPGs, but I found such a passion for it. And I knew that I absolutely loved it. And I knew that I really wanted to make it work as my career. And so I've kind of been setting up a lot of stuff over the past few years to prepare myself to eventually make that change. And I didn't know exactly when that change was going to come. Part of it had to do with the income of what I was making with RPGs. Part of it had to do with timing of certain things in my other job, the research lab that I was working at. There were a lot of like factors that went into this. But I would say that one of the big pieces that was allowing me to go part-time is the continual success of Anamnesis, because a lot of games was pretty blown away by the fact that Anamnesis has continued to do well over the last couple of years. A lot of games, they're released and there's like a big spark, and then they kind of burn out quickly. There's not a lot of chat about them afterwards, after about a year. And that wasn't the case with Anamnesis. People are still talking about it. People are still buying it. People are still playing it. I'm still amazed at the fact that that is the case. Now, I will say sales from Anamnesis are definitely not going to support me part-time. Like that is fully, that is not like enough to be able to do that.
Right.
But it did kind of show me that being able to something that I do suggest for anybody who is looking to do this as a career or to go part-time with it, to support themselves with it, is that creating your own games and having multiple titles that are available for people to purchase can generate some passive income that can be huge in trying to do this. So if you have a game that right now, I'm not even distributing it. IPR is distributing it. Knave of Cups is distributing it. So I send them copies when they're running low on copies, and I'll sometimes do some promo for it. But overall, it's a source of passive income for me. And that is huge. That's a big deal for me to be able to do this part-time, because it allows me to put my time into future projects while I know that I'm still at least getting some income from Anamnesis. So being able to create games that are generating some passive income for you is a big one in order to do this as a career. So part of the transition of going part-time was just knowing that I had some of that passive income that was coming in. And then also making a lot of connections in the RPG space over the last couple of years. I've been really surprised. I have been surprised and delighted by different game designers approaching me about writing for their games. There was a time where I was approached to write an adventure module, and I'm thinking to myself, I've never written an adventure before, but yeah, cool. Let's do it,
That mentality of I've never done this before, yeah, cool, let's do it, is exactly the mentality you got to come into these things with. It's like,
oh yeah,
I don't know what this is. I've never done it before. I probably can. Like everyone who's ever done it had to start from somewhere.
Right. Yeah. And I think part of it too is that, imposter syndrome is a real thing. There have been times where I have definitely experienced it in trying to do what I'm doing. I still don't really fully feel like I know what I'm doing, but, I think a lot of people feel that way. But knowing that if somebody is approaching you about an opportunity, they trust you to be able to do what they're asking. You have probably shown in your other work before that you're capable of what they are wanting you to work on. So that is also a thing, is if somebody approaches you about a project and you're like, I haven't done something that's exactly like this before. I don't know why they're asking me about it. I'm not really sure if I'm capable of it. Just think about like why they're asking you. Thinking about the fact that they could have approached other people and yet they chose to approach you. And there's a reason for that. So don't sell yourself short, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I know that my skills as a designer have really improved by designing for other people's games, because it is giving you restrictions that you are designing inside of. And sometimes those restrictions are ones that you wouldn't have placed on yourself. Different types of settings that maybe you haven't written for this particular genre before. Maybe you haven't written an adventure before. And so being able to work within that space, I think really strengthens and develops your abilities as a writer and designer. So yeah, just if somebody approaches you about something, you might feel some imposter syndrome. Again, I definitely know that I have before. I've definitely been approached by people and been like, I don't know why they're asking me for this thing. But, it's just like, I don't really know. But just like giving it a shot, knowing that there is a reason that they approached you, and just giving it your best shot, I think would be my suggestion with that. So long as, again, your priorities align, so long as it's a good fit for you. In terms of, are you capable of doing this right now? Is it, do you have the time for it? Are they being respectful with how much they're offering to compensate you, that sort of thing? Because also, I mean, it is important to not sell yourself short. Even when you are feeling imposter syndrome, it is important to not sell yourself short. And, if somebody is paying you to write a game, make sure that they are not asking you to do it for free. Unless it is some sort of situation where you're doing a royalty share afterwards, or that you just want to make sure that the setup is something that you want to make sure that nobody's taking advantage of you as a new designer as well.
I think on the other side of the asker for collaboration, coming from that position recently on Project Echo, I think two things there that you're talking about that I think are important is know why you're asking that person to collaborate.
Yes, good one.
Make sure like you have that reason. They may never ask. Like I can't imagine you probably, when you get those messages, are like, why are you asking me? But someone might, but no, you should know that even if no one's ever going to ask. Like I knew reaching out to you, Sam, I was like, Sam is the voice I want in this portion of the game. Like I know that they can do it. I know that they're going to crush it. I know that it's going to fit. Like it was very clear to me that like I wanted your voice in this aspect of the game. And then the other one is like on rates. I think like it's really important to think about that. Like as soon as you decide you want to work with a collaborator, think about like, am I going to be able to pay this person fairly at like the rate that they expect to be paid at and like deserve to be paid at? Like I think that's a huge thing. It was a huge anxiety for me getting into Project Echo. I remember where I was like, I've never raised money, like I've never crowdfunded. Am I going to have enough money to like pay these people I want to work with? And it was like, then like, but like that was one of the first things I asked you was like, what is your rate for writing? Like, let's make sure we hit that. And let's make sure we factor that into this crowdfunding goal, because it was like super important. So when you're asking for them, know what your like budget is, or know how to know that you're going to have to factor in this rate into your crowdfunding goal if you're crowdfunding, or be very candid about what your budget is and like ask somebody if you can work out a different solution, like a work trade or a profit share or things like that. Some people are open to those sorts of things, but just make sure that like that is equally important to the artistic ask, is making sure that it is, you're also respecting that this is people's job, and that you're thinking about that fairly and being honest about it. And that's the thing, is like I didn't know what a fair rate was for a guest writer on a game, so I just asked. Like I was just like, what's your like rate, and what would be something you're comfortable charging?
Yeah, I'm still learning about different rates for different fields, for sure. I've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm still learning about what's fair for artists, for layout artists, for guest writers, all of the stuff. Even being a guest writer, different people will offer different things, and just being able to talk to others about what they feel like is a fair rate compared to what you feel like is a fair rate. And that's one of the things about this field. There's been a lot of discussion about this. I'm not saying anything novel here, but there's a ton of discussion about the fact that we don't have standard rates in this industry. And so everybody kind of sets their own for their different projects. And it does mean that some people can use the fact that there aren't standard rates to try to not pay people what they're worth. But fortunately, that is getting pointed out more and more, and people are more and more vouching for fair rates, which is great. I would also add that it is, Elliot, just like you said, definitely just like asking people what their rates are is great. Also, trying to do a little bit of research first about what is a standard rate beforehand is also great, because sometimes people will sell themselves short when they do say what their rate is. I've worked with a couple of people before who, when I asked what their rate was and they gave me a number, I was like, that sounds really low. And I kind of talked to them about it. And because of the different situations, so in one of them, for example, we were crowdfunding, and I felt pretty confident that we would be able to raise enough in order to increase the rate a little bit. So we talked about it, and we went with a higher rate that we both felt was more fair ultimately. And that meant that we had to crowdfund a little bit more, but it wasn't an egregious amount. And that is something too that you'll learn more as you do work with more people. Ideally, in your first project, you're going to want to be able to pay everybody a fair rate. If you don't know what a fair rate is, and if they're selling themselves short, you might end up not doing that, which sucks. And it's something that I am striving to more and more. I'm striving to more and more understand what a fair rate is in every place, and to know when somebody is selling themselves short. And also, if a game does really well in crowdfunding, to give bonuses to collaborators, to offer a royalty split for collaborators. That's actually something that I'm kind of recently changing in like this adjustment to going part-time. Is I'm really wanting to make sure that I set up really good foundations for this business. So I've decided I'm going to start doing royalty shares with all of my collaborators on all of my games, because that's something that's really important to me. That's something that I think is more fair. And so that is something that I'm moving forward with. But that doesn't mean that your game has to have royalty shares in order to fairly compensate somebody. Just work with people, talk about it, do your research. It'll take some learning, and it'll take some time, but it's really important to look into all of that and to ask around about that.
And the places you can look, I mean, like I know when, like, this was Brian's first time doing layout, my first time hiring a person to do layout. Obviously, Brian and I are friends, so we could have very open discussions about this. But one of the things I went and did was I went and looked at layout artists whose work I like, and went to their website and looked at their rates to like talk to Brian about, like, I think this is like the level of layout we're falling within, and like, do you feel comfortable with that sort of thing?
That's a great idea.
I remember specifically Momados, who is an incredible layout designer, has a really comprehensive rate sheet for layout that, like, I think we've modeled right off of for like a certain level, where they've got like basic, simple, or like basic, simplex, and complex, or like the three levels. And it's it's to me reads as a very fair pay structure. And so like that's a place you can go, is like if there's somebody you know is working in the space and has like a level of like work you respect or success based on what you see them doing, like what are they charging? And like you probably want to, like, maybe they're charging at a higher level because they've had a certain level of success, but you still probably want to like model those levels of like what the people who are doing this for work are getting paid. And with that, Sam, maybe we should just put a number on what are you charging for like guest writing? And I know the answer based on Project Echo, but maybe and hopefully you've raised your rates in the last 6 months.
So my minimum rate is 10 cents per word. I have worked on different projects at about that rate before. Often I have worked at a higher rate than that. And I think that even when somebody approaches me about a project, if the rate was 10 cents a word, I would really look at the project and think, is this going to be worth it to me at this rate? That's kind of my threshold. If somebody offered a lower rate than that, then I would talk to them to see if they would be willing to raise the rate, or if not, I might not take the project. Now, granted, if it was a lower rate plus a certain amount of royalty share, that might change things depending on what the project is too. So there's There's definitely flexibility there. There's definitely things that are, it's definitely a case by case basis in some ways.
Sure.
So the kind of 10 cents per word minimum is not just oh yeah, definitely never ever doing anything for less than that. But it is kind of my guideline to know whether I feel like I'm being paid fairly. A lot of times too, I have been paid more than that, or people have offered a certain amount and then said, hey, if our crowdfunding campaign does really well, then everybody's going to get a bonus. And that's happened a couple of times, which is great. But yeah, that's what I would say.
And I know for a lot of people, so my main career has been in film and television as an assistant director. And what that means is that I'm freelance and that every single job I take, which is, 8, 9, 10 jobs a year, I have to renegotiate my rate. So I've got to do a job interview and a rate negotiation multiple times a year. And so you get comfortable with it. But it's an important thing to remember that like getting comfortable with those conversations about money is an incredibly valuable thing. Because I know for a lot of people, if you work in a more standard, office job or a salary job, you probably have that conversation once at the beginning of your career and then like once every year kind of.
Yeah.
Getting comfortable with saying like, this is what I'm worth, this is what I want, this is what I won't accept below is not as confrontational as it feels. And it all like whenever you're talking about money, it always feels a little like, I don't know what I can say. Knowing what you're worth, being very confident and saying that with purpose. And then also just, having knowledge of your own worth is incredibly helpful. And most of the time, if you're talking to someone who is interested in hiring you or you're interested in hiring, and both of you are on the same page and both of you, it's a collaborative effort, that conversation isn't awkward. It's just like, it feels a little weird because we as Americans have made it that way for some reason.
Yeah.
Because capitalism.
Yep. Love it. Great. Good times. Yep.
but oftentimes the way that conversation goes, if it starts to feel confrontational or weird, that's a pretty good indicator like, this probably isn't the project for me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. If you're talking to somebody about a rate and they seem to be kind of aggressive about what they're offering you and you feel like that is not a fair payment for you, then I would not be taking that job. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Run in the other direction, probably. If you get bad vibes in that's probably not a good collaborative relationship.
I have also had the thing where it's like, well, our usual guy does it for this. And I'm like, great, get your usual guy.
Yeah.
And that's another situation where like, as the person asking for a collaborator, you can say, I don't know really how to navigate this conversation, or this is my first time navigating this conversation. And like, assuming you're coming at this with good intentions, you can say, my ultimate intention is to get you paid as fairly as possible. Yeah. So like, let's just talk about that. And like, I think maybe I did too much when we're having these conversations is I would always check with like you, Sam, and Will, like, are you sure you're good with this? Yeah. Like, I just want to make sure like this, like you feel like this is fair. So that's another place where you can just be honest and be kind of like humble about your level of knowledge and be willing to like, just let people know where your intention is at and then try to work to a solution openly. Always advocate for being open is my feel.
Yes, I agree. And I'm definitely still navigating or learning to navigate those conversations. I'm still, there are still times where it feels a little bit awkward to talk about money. But the more that you do it, the easier it gets, the more fluid it gets. And it's definitely something that is really, really important, especially in a space where all of these rates are not standard. So even if it does feel a little awkward bringing it up, it is so important too. And, Elliot, what you were saying, it's so important to just be candid about, making sure that this person feels like they are being offered what they're worth and just asking them, does this feel like a fair rate to you? Is there anything else that we can be doing to like help this?
A thing that if you're trying to hire someone or bring someone on as a collaborator and you're going to be the person paying them, I say this with I'm pleading with everyone who ever does this. I've gotten so many calls where they're like, hey, let me tell you all about the project. Here's what we're going to be filming. Here are the number of days. Here's all this. Here's all this. And I sit on the phone for freaking, 20 minutes listening to all their stuff. And at the end, they tell me the rate. Or even worse, they make me ask. If you're coming in and like trying to hire someone, give them that information of like, let them decide with that information from the beginning rather than like giving them a whole spiel all the time.
That's
try to give that the important information that people like want to see right up front. Give it to them right up front.
Mm-hmm.
I've wasted so many hours listening to pitches for shows that I will never work on.
I want to talk a little bit more about your move to part-time and what that has kind of meant for you. I'm curious how you're thinking about splitting your time. A, what hours of your week are now TTRPG hours? How are you doing that relative to your other job? And B, how are you thinking about collaboration and personal projects and finding that balance?
Sure, yeah. It is something that I'm still navigating. So it's been about 3 weeks since I made the transition. And so a lot of that time has also just been general moving things, got to find a new doctor, that type of stuff. So
love that.
Yep, all good. Just went to the DMV a couple days ago. Yeah. Getting all that taken care of. So I will say that I'm still navigating it. But in terms of the number of hours that I'm planning to work, I am still working part-time for the research lab that I was working for before. And by part-time, that is about 18 hours a week and might actually be fewer eventually. My goal is to get it down to closer to 12 and 15. My lab knows this, but we have had some like personal changes in the lab and everything. So I'm working 18 hours a week right now. And so essentially the rest of my time is working on TTRPGs. And so it's, if you want to go by a standard 40-hour week, then I guess that's about 22 hours of my week.
But is it, or are you still squeezing in off hours as if you're still doing this on your off
Yeah,
hours?
exactly. I would not say that is like 22 hours is not an accurate week by week assessment. Sometimes it might be less if I have other things going on that week. But sometimes it's more because I do stuff on the weekends. And it's also a strange balance for me because, Elliot, like you said, I was used to doing this in kind of my off hours as a hobby. And there is still that kind of desire to work on it in my off, quote unquote off hours, for better or for worse. And how much I end up working like over 40 hours a week kind of just depends on how things are doing and what's going on at the moment. I would imagine that the next time I have a crowdfunding campaign, I'll probably be working more than 40 hours a week, but then there might be weeks that are more relaxed. And it's really something that I'm still navigating. But also part of this is that I'm doing this because I just love it. I love almost every aspect of it. And so it doesn't always I'm very grateful that it doesn't always feel like work to me. So it's kind of a weird mixture of like, yes, I'm doing this for my profession. I'm also doing this for fun. Where's the line? Like how much I don't want to overwork myself, but I also don't want to be stressed by how much work I have to do. So it's kind of, it's an interesting thing to balance when you're taking a hobby and turning it into a profession. And that is something that I can speak on it a little bit, but I'm still kind of at the stage where I'm trying to figure out how it feels. And I'm very aware that a lot of people talk about when they take their creative field and they try to make it into their profession, that it really changes things. And it can sometimes be really stressful to take something creative and to take creativity and try to like live off of creativity essentially. And that sometimes when people take their hobby and try to make it their profession, that it doesn't feel fun anymore. And that's something that I'm like super aware of, that I'm going into this being very aware of. I'm really trying to make sure that I'm checking in about how I'm feeling about things, that I'm giving myself the space to do things that feel a little bit more like I'm doing a job, and also to feel a little bit more like I'm doing it for fun. To also have personal projects that I'm working on that are TTRPG related that I'm not trying to do for profit. I have a game that I want to write that's just the intention is for it to just be for me and my friends. And so I'm really excited to work on that. And I want to make sure that I have those projects too. So it's probably going to be tricky to balance, and it's possible that I'm going to come out of this and be like, hey, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe doing this as my income is not a good idea. And maybe I would enjoy this more as a hobby. And I'm fully aware that in, a year from now, that might be the decision I make and I might go back to work full time. But right now, I'm loving it. Right now, I'm enjoying it. And right now, I'm still learning to navigate it. So I don't know. I mean, I think in 6 months, I'll have more to say about it.
I appreciate that perspective, though, that you're like, you're kind of welcoming what this experience is going to teach you about the move, while at the same time having waited till you were set up to feel like you can make it work.
Yeah. I think that it's just important to stay aware of how you're feeling about it. And ultimately, I could say like, oh yeah, my dream job is to work on TTRPGs full time, right? I mean, that is true, right? That is what I would love to do. But in a year from now, if I'm just finding that I am not enjoying this, that it is stressing me out, I don't want to keep pursuing it because it is my dream job, right? Things change over time, and you have to be able to pick things up and let things go. And who knows? I hope that this won't be the case. I could be completely burnt out of RPGs in a year. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's a possibility. And I'm moving forward with this experience, aware that these different things could happen and that's okay. No matter what comes out of it, as long as I'm taking care of myself and I'm doing what I need to do to be healthy, then that's the best decision for me.
Love that. So we've got this segment on the show called Nat Ones Are Still Fun, where we ask our guests to share a failure or some kind of experience, whether that's a capital F failure or something that just kind of got messed up, that they think provided a lesson that's kind of worthwhile to share. Mm-hmm. So from like the span of your entire TTRPG experience, is there anything you think is like a good failure that people can learn from?
I think that one thing that I have learned as a game designer, and that I'm still learning, is to just really trust your players. So I had a playtest that I did a while back that overall, while the playtest was fine, I realized that there were all of these aspects in it that almost seemed, when the players were going through this game, there were some questions in the game that were kind of like, how is your character feeling about this right now? Like kind of describe your character's response to this. And I was able to sit in on this playtest with two of my friends who were playing this game. And it just felt like when they got to those questions, it was almost like embarrassing for me as a designer to be like they are in their characters. They know how their characters are feeling. They know how their character is responding to this. I don't need to ask them about that. It feels like a disservice to be asking them about it. It feels like they're so it definitely seemed like I wasn't trusting them enough to create these rounded characters and to create this interesting story on their own. And so that was a big lesson for me in game design, just being able to understand that if people are playing your game, it probably means that they're really excited about the game, and it means that they probably are making characters in a story that they are also really excited about. And having some questions about kind of the situation or about your characters for like character development, those are all fine. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but asking so directly, like, how is your character feeling right now? They probably know that. They probably are very aware of that. And they don't need you asking about it. So just like, it's definitely good to provide a framework through like the mechanics of the game in order to help people create a story. I feel like my role as a designer is to create a framework to help somebody create a story. And so that is through the mechanics, that might be through some examples of play, that might be through providing some lists of things that somebody can choose from for inspiration, but asking like, how is your character feeling? Asking questions like that so directly is, I think, a disservice and just isn't trusting your players enough to be able to do that on their own.
I think this is also a good reason to like do play tests, because it becomes immediately apparent like, oh, we don't need that at all. Oh, this was confusing my players completely. Mm-hmm. And you said it's like, it's an embarrassing experience. Like it sucks when someone like asks you a question about your game design that you thought like, oh, there's no worry that they're going to get this. But it's the most efficient way to fix all the problems that will arise regardless. It's you know what it is? It's going to the dentist. I haven't been to the dentist in way too long. And what the dentist is going to tell me is going to be bad. But the longer I go without going to the dentist, I don't have cavities right now. Technically, I've never had a cavity. When I go to the dentist, they're going to say, you've had cavities for a while.
Oh, no. Yeah. That's
At least you're not trying to sell your teeth to people.
I'm not trying to sell my teeth.
People for money for them.
Is that coming from a thing, or was that just a random thing you said? is there a reference point?
Because games you're selling to people. I see.
The
metaphor. So sorry. I thought that would have connected.
I immediately went to like, is there a pop culture thing I'm missing where some guy's selling his teeth?
Wild.
Was that the new season of White Lotus? Is that what it was all about?
But that's the thing about like, with a game, you're asking people to pay money for it. So like, have like, make sure you like respect the players in that way, and like how you learn how a player thinks is playtesting, and also I think playing lots of different games. Like Sam, I think you play a lot of different games. I imagine it's with these same two friends who I think often play with. Yeah. So you like learn. I've played with like a gaming group for a few years, and like you really learn how players are by playing.
Yeah,
like
for
that's
sure.
like it's just you see where the fun little nuggets of like thought and creation come out that you can lean into as a designer. So play testing, great. Also playing lots of different games is like you'll just learn that stuff even more.
I'll also say with playtesting, like a lot of people are nervous about it because they know that they're going to get critique on it. But hey, it does suck sometimes, right?
It sucks.
But overall, I will say that my experiences doing playtests, even when the playtests didn't go as well as I thought they would, even in this one that I was just describing, where it was kind of like I was reading through it as they were playing, and I was kind of embarrassed that I was asking these such like obvious questions. That playtest gave me so much inspiration. I came out of that playtest like more inspired about that game than I had ever been. I was like, I had all of these notes. I had a ridiculous number of notes that I took during this thing, and I was like really ready to dive back into it because it just is seeing people play it, and even if there were parts that were trickier to get through, it was still a fun experience overall. And like even knowing that there are parts that weren't as fun or parts that needed work, being able to see it being played and being able to receive that feedback, both the positive and the negative, in my opinion, was just really motivating and really inspiring. So it's not all doom and gloom, I guess. A lot of people feel very nervous about playtests, but I would say if you look at it in terms of, hey, I want to make this game as great as I can possibly make it, and this is a step in order to help me do that, and this is going to like provide me with a lot more creative ideas that I can work off of. I think that that's kind of the best way to look at it, and you might be surprised at how like reinvigorating a playtest can be.
Listen, you can brush your teeth all you want, but you gotta go to the dentist.
You gotta go to the dentist. Yeah.
I'm not going to say any other extensions of this metaphor. I learned my lesson.
Keep all those teeth in the mouth.
And put your teeth on the shelf.
Put them on the shelf.
Put them on. Anyway, I'm curious from a design perspective, if this move to part-time is changing anything for you. Like from like we've talked a bit about like the realities of this move and what that means for you, but like as like a person who has I imagine lots of ideas, how does this change those ideas, or like how big you want to make them, or how you want to make them? Like, has it changed anything creatively for you? And I know you're just getting started, so maybe not yet.
Honestly, not a lot yet. I think maybe it's because I've been preparing for this move for a while, because I knew that I wanted to do it and it was just a matter of when. But the projects that I'm currently working on aren't any different than the ones that I was already working on. The ones that my goals over the next few months haven't really changed at all. I have a couple of games that I know that I want to release in physical form, and my goal is to still make those. Now, as far as what comes after that, I don't know. It might change. It could be that I try to make more games that have physical runs, or more games that I'm working with an artist and a layout artist and an editor, to make really polished games. I might end up doing more of that in the future, but I was kind of already planning to. So I don't think it's changed a whole lot yet, but I think it's also really important to me that I'm still making games that I really want to make, that I'm not designing games. It would be, in my opinion, I would consider this endeavor a failure if I were to start designing games only based on what I think is going to make the most money. It is really important to me that I continue to design games that I genuinely want to make, that I design stuff that excites me, because I also think that if you get really excited about something, chances are there's a lot of other people that are going to be really excited about that thing, even if that's not something that everybody is talking about, even if it's something that's kind of unique and that hasn't really been done much before. If you're really excited about it, there's probably going to be other people who are really excited. So, and that excitement is infectious. When you really love what you're doing, I think that really shines through in the work itself. So yeah, I guess the move to part-time I guess it's not really changing my projects a whole lot. At least I don't think that it will. It's possible that it will over time, but not yet.
Just giving you more time.
Yeah.
We'll all be better for it. I can't wait for some of these games you've got coming out, like Death. I'm very excited. I continue to be very excited for Death of the Author.
Thanks.
I think that's such a cool game.
That one's I'm excited for that too. I feel like it's taken me a lot longer to release than I thought it would. But that one's definitely one of the ones I'm most excited about right now.
And what all, just so let's lay it out there, what all other kinds of collaboration are you doing? So you do guest writing, editing, is there more?
Those are kind of the primary ones. A couple of other kind of side things that I do are I actually make playlists for people's games. I don't compose music, so not to get that. I know nothing about music composition, but I do playlist commissions. So if somebody wants a 10-song playlist that's based off of their RPG, I do these little mini commissions where I'll work with them to figure out kind of the tone that they're going for, and then I'll go and I'll find a bunch of songs and arrange a playlist for them, which I've been doing for a bit now. I used to make a ton of playlists, I guess I always have for a while. It was a really big hobby in college and after graduation. And so it just kind of felt like a natural thing to start doing. And it's been really fun. I've chatted with a lot of people and heard of a lot of really cool games because of it. And also I have playlists to listen to for any occasion now. But it's, so I do that. And then I also do a little bit of voiceover work. Not a whole lot. It's just kind of, I don't really actively look for it that often, but I just kind of put it out there. And every once in a while, somebody will ask me about it. I actually just recorded a little bit of material for Outer Rim Uprising, which is this mothership bundle that there's a ton of different designers who are collaborating on this bundle, but it's being organized by Eco. And they asked me, they're like, hey, we're going to be doing these audio segments where I'm chatting with the different designers from the bundle. I would love for you to be able to record pieces from these different items, from these different, from their different writing. So that was really fun because it's kind of a mixture of voiceover and voice acting, because some of there's in-universe pamphlets and things like that. So it was super fun to record. So things like that. It's those are definitely both smaller, but every once in a while something will come my way, and it's a lot of fun to have that variety.
So you're doing these three things: guest writing, editing, and some voiceover and playlists. 4 things. How would you recommend somebody who's maybe just been a designer of their own stuff, who wants to get into collaborating on other people's projects, whether that's as a guest writer, as an editor, layout designer, artist? What would your kind of putting yourself out there kind of advice be for people who wanted to do that?
I mean, honestly, just making the announcement that this is something that you're doing and something that you're looking for is the big one. Just being able to, post to socials and say like, hey, I'm looking to do more of this work. These are the things that I've written already. These are the things that these are examples of my art. I would really love to do more work in the RPG space. If anybody is looking for designers, if anybody's looking for artists, that's a big one. Also, you can be on the lookout for when people announce that they're looking for collaborators, because some people will make announcements on Twitter saying, "Hey, I'm looking for writers, or I'm looking, for people to submit to be a writer, submit pitches." I've seen a few designers accept pitches for different pieces of design, and then they choose which pitches they like. Or I'm looking for artists to do art for this particular type of game. And if you think that your art would fit, then please let me know. So kind of being on the lookout for that too, and just putting yourself out there when you see it. And making these pitches and contacting these people is something to just keep an eye out for. And then also too, if you have worked with somebody in the past that, like, let's say that you have designed your own game and you worked with a layout artist for that game, and you really enjoyed your collaboration. If that layout artist also does game design work, you can just tell them. You can just say, hey, by the way, if you're ever doing game design work and you're looking for somebody to do some writing in the future, keep me in mind. And that just kind of like tells them that like, oh, you're open for this. Like it just lets them know that, hey, you are available to do this work. And now that they know that there's somebody who they could go to about it if they wanted to. So just kind of being open about it, letting people know is the number one, just so that people are aware. But yeah, it's something that is difficult to navigate because there are so many people who are looking for work, and sometimes it's hard to, I know that I've been reached out to by a couple people before that I wasn't expecting. I hadn't really chatted with them much before, and it was kind of a surprise, but you never really know who's going to find your stuff and who's going to be inspired by your work, and who's going to see that you're available. So it always helps to let people know.
And endorse the collaborators you like working with. So
yes.
I will take this opportunity to say, work with Sam.
Work with Elliot and Brian.
If anyone's looking for a layout artist, I'm seeking submissions.
Brian crushed the Project Echo first layout for a TTRPG, and Brian.
Oh
crushed
wow!
Project
Oh nice,
Echo.
yeah,
So
that's awesome.
Absolutely, hire Brian, hire Sam, hire Will, hire Behold. I'm gonna shout out the whole Project Echo team. Anybody who touched Project Echo deserves more money and more jobs, more projects. Yeah, great people. We love it. Brian, you want to take us to the final cue?
Yeah, Sam, thank you so much for coming. I've got one more question for you.
Sure.
Which is, what are you bringing to the table? So who is a person? What is a game, show, a resource, anything in the TTRPG space that you would recommend right now and want to kind of shine a spotlight on?
I have felt really inspired by Snow's writing recently. So they wrote My Body is a Cage. They wrote Lylan Colley. And they also have a blog called Nerves, where they blog about different things about RPGs. And I feel like they've done a lot of really incredible work. They really do a lot of kind of genre breaking stuff, a lot of stuff that is extremely unique. And I don't read a whole lot of blogs, admittedly, but Snow's blog I've found really inspiring as a designer. And so they've done some really unique stuff within their writing that I find is really compelling and that I've really enjoyed. So the one that really sticks in my brain is that they wrote a review of Lancer that was written as though they had gone back in time to interview their 14-year-old self about it. So it was like this review was written as this interview between Snow and 14-year-old Snow. And that was there was pieces in it that, like, yes, it was this review of this game, but it was also this piece of like creative nonfiction where you were kind of learning a little bit about Snow by reading it. And it was very I just was kind of blown away by it. I thought it was so clever. And I just think that they do a lot of work that shows the expanse of what you can do in this space, and that shows how creative you can get with these things. So I highly recommend checking out their stuff, checking out their games, checking out the Nerves blog, and reading some of their writing, because it's very inspiring as a designer.
And we will we'll link Snow's blog Nerves in the show notes, and absolutely second that recommendation. Was just reading their reading list that they just put out.
I just read
great.
that too.
Brian, you sent me that.
Oh, I didn't put it together. That's what I sent you. This is a great blog.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great blog. Well, with that, thank you, Sam Leigh, for coming to the table.
Thank
Do
you
you
for
want to
having
tell
me.
people where they can find you?
Sure. Kind of my main link where you can find all of my other links is samleigh.card.co. That's samleigh.carrd.co. You can find all of my links there to TikTok, to Tumblr, to Twitter. Who knows what sites are going to be up in the next year, but all of mine are on there. And then all of my games are found at blinkingbirchgames.itch.io.
And if you want more gamey content, check out the 20-sided newsletter, the Many-Sided Media Discord. Those are both linked down below in our show notes. Rate, review, follow, Talk of the Table wherever you get your podcasts. And that's what the table is talking about. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
You like us. You really like us. At least, I assume that you do, as you've listened to every minute of this episode. And yet you haven't already left us a 5-star review? Ugh. Well, what are you waiting for? Get over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave that review now. It's always wonderful to hear words from our adoring fans. Getting more ratings helps people find the show and love it as well. And we love to hear your nice words. So head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave us that 5-star review. Ta-ta!